Well, welcome everyone. This is an information webinar and on Hakomi Psychedelic Assisted Psychotherapy Training. And I'm joined here with Susan Santara, core faculty of this training, and also Brad Jacobs, who's also faculty on this training. So you're going to have three faculty members here, as well as the EmbodyWise staff. David just introduced himself. There's also Jamie and Hillary. So really great to see you all. So the way we're going to do this is we have a few slides prepared, which probably will answer most of your questions. And if you can bear with us to go through the slides, that way it's a little bit more organized. And then we leave some time for questions at the end. Yeah, sounds good. And since I can't see what your state of mind is, maybe you give me a little bit like, I'm great, I'm sort of, or I'm not. Like, okay, where are you? Just give me a somatic signal. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Much better. Appreciate that. Great. So we'll have a few slides here for you, and they will be sent out to you as well afterwards and more information. So you can just relax and take in the information. Okay, here we go. So you are interested in a brand new program. This is our first inaugural Hakomi Psychedelic Assisted Psychotherapy training. And this is a training we're going to be hosting in California, in the Bay Area, and in Sydney, Australia. So two trainings are launching this year. And as I said, a warm welcome to you all, or as we say in Hakomi, all of you is welcome here. That's a Hakomi greeting. We welcome all of you here and all of who you are here. So that's very much our Hakomi greeting. Susan?
Great. So let me just go over with you, and yes, welcome to all of you. I just want to let you know what we're going to be covering in this brief slideshow so that you can just relax inside. If there's something that you don't see covered on this list, then we'll circle back around during questions. But we're going to talk about what is Hakomi's perspective, what is the Hakomi Psychedelics Assisted Psychotherapy approach, what makes our training different from other trainings that you might see out there, who we are as faculty, and who are our guest faculty that are going to join us in this training. We have some great guest faculty I'm excited for you to hear about. What our focus is in the training, and a little bit about how we're going to present our material. We're going to talk about the experiential ketamine assisted psychotherapy weekend. We have a whole weekend dedicated to having visceral experiential psychedelic experience, both ingesting, if that's what's chosen, and also certainly practice sitting with one another. So we'll talk a lot about that. And then we'll go through logistics about how to apply, dates, costs, registration, scholarships, all of the logistics. And then we'll make time for questions at the end. So hopefully we've hit a lot of the key points, but that's what we're going to go through during this time together. Thank you.
So for those of you who are new to Hakomi or maybe haven't taken a training or workshop with us, just a little bit of a background. Hakomi is a Hopi word, and it means how do you stand in relation to those many realms? And in the way we like to start anything in Hakomi is we take a moment of mindfulness. And I'd like you for just a few moments here to shift into the reference point of slowing down, feeling your breath, feeling your body, just allowing yourself to shift from what is this information coming at me to how am I actually arriving into this webinar? And feeling for a moment, how do you stand in relation to all of your experiences? Just feeling in your body right now, your relations with yourself, with your family, with your community, with your spiritual practice, any relations that you have, just feeling that. Make that shift for just a moment and notice what you need to do inside to do so. How do you stand in relation to those many realms? Just feel that. and notice what happens in your experience. Is there kind of a visceral feeling in your body? Are you thinking? Are you sensing? Are you feeling? Just noticing. Thank you. So you're getting already a feeling for how we actually enter into our learning, which is very experiential. And in Hakomi, the how do you stand in relation to those many realms was a hope or is a Hopi word that we're allowed to use and are still allowed to use. And we actually have a whole committee that's dedicated at the Hakomi Institute. You can read up on it. The use of the name so that we're in right relation with the Hopi nation as well as we're using this beautiful word. The modern translation is all my relations and who are you? So Hakomi looks at the whole organization of experience as human experience and what our relations, how are we connecting with our relations around us? So it's within and without.
And so when we think about that word Hakomi, how we stand in relation to our experience, we're also thinking about how are we going to hold that in relation to psychedelic experience or expanded state experience. And so what we know about psychedelic substances and also induced expanded state realms through the use of mindfulness, which is classic Hakomi, using the expanded state of mindfulness, we're really asking bigger, more multidimensional questions here. So how do I stand in relationship to the multidimensional realm of the experience of being alive, being human, being animal, vegetable, mineral, all of the things, the ways in which we are what we are. And Hakomi is a perfect modality for teaching the kind of presence, the kind of centeredness, the perspective of loving presence that holds those kinds of deep questions. And so we're not just looking at the questions about who am I in such a personal focus, but it's like, who are all of my connections? How am I connection to my experience of being in this world? How am I connected to what I am becoming and what I have been? And a lot of those questions in an altered state are much more dimensional as well. How am I connected to my ancestry and to their experiences of maybe intergenerational trauma or of the celebration of my ancestry? How do I influence and how am I impacted by my descendants who are not yet to come, or the ecosystem that I live with, the land that I live on, the energies of my life, and also the subtler realms of my own knowing. So the questions themselves become psychedelic, and Hakomi in this training will be engaging those questions and holding those questions in a really big, spacious, but sturdy and stable, grounded way. Oh, this is my slide too. All right, so sorry. So what is Hakomi psychedelic assisted psychotherapy? The reason that we're good for this is because we have been pioneering this use of mindfulness and altered state experiences for 50 years now, very long time, long before everyone else was having people get quiet and go inside. We have mastered this ability to not only have our clients learn to use their inner world, but we teach therapists how to use their inner world, their somatic experience, their intuition and knowing. And so that is really well brought to a psychedelic environment, not just for the preparation of that experience, but for the integration of those experiences. And we're grounded in the foundational ethical principles of Hakomi, and we'll teach about those, but those are the spirit of unity, this collaboration, non-hierarchical collaboration between ourselves and our clients, the experience of organicity, meaning trusting the natural unfolding of living organisms, the natural healing process, the innate healing intelligence that is spoken about. Of course, the use of mindfulness. We have a strong commitment to non-violence, non-pushiness, non-overpowering, supporting self-directed awareness and knowledge from within the client. And then, of course, the respect for mind, body, spirit, holism, the understanding that we are so much more than what we think and what we feel emotionally. We are a body with an incredible intelligence, and our spirit is also moving, connecting, and informing our experience.
And I think I want to highlight here also that it's part of the method is a very non-directive approach of psychotherapy. In Hakomi, we have a quality of waiting and being with the client's process as it unfolds. It's actually a terminology that we teach, and that requires a training of being with rather than doing therapy. And it sounds kind of simple. Yeah, I can just be with my client, but it actually requires some very skilled attunement, somatic attunement skills, tracking skills, and really listening for what is actually being expressed in the client and what are the nonverbal cues and how to read those nonverbal cues in the present moment. So it's both a deep shepherding of a process that wants to unfold and also helping the client to come into a very immersive experience. And with that, we really are touching into the innate healing intelligence. And that's something that's also being very highlighted in general in a lot of psychedelic approaches, and you can see it in the research as well, how important it is to listen to the innate healing intelligence. That's a phrase that's being used a lot, and Hakomi has been doing that for 50 years. We really are listening to what's inherently wise inside the client. Rather than having to fix the client, we're listening very deeply. What are the emerging qualities that want to unfold towards wholeness and healing? So, what matters in somatic intervention, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy in particular, is that the somatic psychotherapy tools are very important. Trauma states are very common in psychedelic work. And so we want to be able to recognize some of these states and want to be recognize what are these nonverbal, what we call indicators in the body. So Hakomi is excellent in tracking what are the somatic cues in the body that indicate a deeper material coming up and trauma states coming up. A lot of psychedelic states are nonverbal. We can't necessarily ask sometimes the client what exactly is going on. And so we need to be able to read the body accurately and what's actually occurring for the client. That means we need to have what we call a somatic attunement. We need to be really tuned in through our own bodies, what's happening and picking up what's happening for the client. And so the discernment of what's mine, what's theirs really needs to be trained. Hakomi is an immersive process. It's a process where we're going towards deep core material and looking at how the person is organizing at the depth level. And so psychedelic work is the same. It's a very immersive a process. So Hakomi has the skill set to both shepherd that in a very mindful and very kind way. And then, of course, in the integration phase, which is very critical in psychedelic work, we have Hakomi is a full, complete method of psychotherapy. There are tools that we use, they're also somatically based to help the client to make sense and meaning of the psychedelic experience. As you probably know, the psychedelic experience is there's one experience that you can go into the journey but then really what do you make of it? How do you bring it into your life? How do you actually actualize what you have experienced into your life?
Mhm. And when when we're working with our clients doing talk therapy, we rely so much on our verbal communication, on delivering, kind words, but highlighting things in a good way, bringing things to attention. When we're working with folks in altered states, oftentimes there's very little or very limited, in terms of clarity, communication that's verbal. A lot of what is expressed is either physical or energetic. And so part of the training and what we be working with is developing and mastering these subtle skills of being able to track very, very closely, not just what the body's doing, but what the energy's doing, how the breath is working, to begin to track down these implicit experiences. Being the person can be in such a deep experience and nothing can apparently be going on, and unless a person um, owns their ability to feel into the space, to open their own sense of intuition, to read into imagery that's coming to them, to feel into the energy of the room, just to get a sense of what's going on and to sit back and know when to intervene based on their own experience and when not to intervene, when to move and when not to move. So it's really a honing of more subtle skills than we would use in a regular, um, normal consciousness kind of environment. We'll also be looking at the use of ritual and other subtle kind of skill, other subtle environment supports, ritual, music, movement, nonverbal elements to support expanded states, just using the breath, using postures, maybe mudra, artwork. There's so many additional tools that are available when we're not just sitting face to face and relating from a more of a mental perspective. So there'll be a focus on that we get to really indulge in and expand.
So, what makes this training different? There are many different trainings out there, and the focus is really learning through direct experience. Both Hakomi and psychedelics are very much a direct experience. And so, what we're going to do here, we have an immersive in person. So, this training is in person. Other than the webinars, there's not going to be any Zoom. So, you might be delighted that this is really we're going to create a very sacred container and we're going to be in person together as a community. And it includes, in California, it includes 4-day modules every other month. There will be some online teaching that is through our guest speakers and some group practices in between the modules, but the actual learning, the teaching will happen in person. And that's an important value that we have because we really are holding it as a ceremonial style of learning. And we also really believe in the power of a community learning. Also, we're going to teach you very practical skills. This is a how-to training. How do you sit with somebody? How do you guide them through a psychedelic assisted therapy process? So it's not theoretical, it's very much a how-to. We teach you moment by moment skills. We teach you somatic tracking, attunement, how to read the body, how to work with your own energetics, how to work with transference, countertransference, your own shadow. We have a huge, huge list here and skills that we're actually going to teach you. So it's very much a how-to on the ground, how you actually do this work with people.
Yeah. And the reason that that's so important to us is we really see the value of certainly of academic learning and taking information in and sorting and all of that. But we really have learned through all of these years that the way people gain mastery is by practicing and by experiencing. So it's hard to talk someone through an experience that you haven't had. So it's our real desire to have this training be heavy, not heavy, meaty in terms of the academic information, the how to information, but be equally weighted with experiences that are very personal so that you can find this territory within your own being and know the territory from the inside also. So we talk about soma up, body up experiences, but we also want it to be in a ritual environment. We are hoping that this training is a lot of fun, that we really enjoy ourselves, and that the learning is not just something where we feel well equipped afterward, but that we feel transformed, that we feel tended to, that we feel healed, expanded, and that we've grown by going through the ceremony, so to speak, of the training. And we'll be holding it in that way that it's our hope that this training feels sacred, that it feels um, meaningful and transformational for all of us as we go through this alchemical process together of learning and growing. Um, and it includes a part of that will be the 4-day module of direct personal experience with the psychedelic state that we'll talk a little bit more about with ketamine. So even if a trainee decides they don't want to ingest medicine, there will be the value of being able to sit with their cohort because there will be people that do want to ingest. So we won't be just talking about psychedelic experiences. We'll be steeped in a whole weekend of different levels of psychedelic experience so that you can get a visceral sense of it. That's the experiential learning that we're looking for in this training. So it should be very rich.
And so here's your core faculty. So you can see that these are all Hakomi trained, Hakomi trainers or Hakomi graduates. Susan, myself, Karen, and Ido, we're all Hakomi trainers. And Karen and Ido are both Hakomi trainers and also co-founded Hakomi Israel. Karen Zafrati is also the executive director of MAPS in Israel, and both of them have been part of the studies at MAPS as well, some of the original research studies. It's very exciting to have them. And then Tara Shannon is a Hakomi teacher in training, and she is an Indigenous healer. We're very excited to have her knowledge and wisdom to join us. And then, of course, Brad, who's here as well, is a Hakomi graduate and has a ketamine clinic and is a specialist in ketamine, and we'll talk more about that. So we're very excited to have him as part of our faculty. Do you want to
Great.
go? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. And here is the list of guest speakers as they currently exist. We're really excited to have Rick Doblin come and join us. Rick is the founder of MAPS, and I'm sure you've all heard of MAPS. He's going to come with and share the new findings, new research, and honestly, whatever Rick is excited about, I'm sure we'll all be really excited to hear. He's a dynamic speaker, and we're really happy that he was willing to join our training and help promote what we're doing. I know there's a lot of good feeling around Hakomi and working with psychedelics. Annie Mithofer is a MAPS researcher and trainer, one of the original MAPS researchers and trainers, is also a Hakomi graduate, and she will be presenting on Hakomi and MDMA research and MAPS. Rachel Yehuda, professor of psychiatry and neuroscience of trauma, will be presenting on neuroscience and psychedelics, and that will be really, really rich and informative. And then we're also really pleased to have Kylea Taylor, who is the author of The Ethics of Caring, who's going to present on inner ethics, her ethics model. Kylea has many, many years, I think many decades of experience working with Stan Groff in his model of holotropic breath work and working with people in altered states, and has a very unique and grounded perspective and way of looking at ethics and how to hold this deep work so that everyone remains safe and the work stays in consciousness and is will be a big support to our training. And then, do you want to talk about Jeff?
Sure. And Jeff Leifer is the founder of Circadian, and he's going to be a guest faculty, unfortunately, only in California. He's going to be in person. And he does a lot of work with bridging Indigenous knowledge and bringing together communities that are, for example, women run co-ops in with Indigenous communities, plant medicines, and helping them to get funding to be the stewards of plant medicines. So he is in the space of supporting these communities, supporting resources, and also partnering with Indigenous to really think and through about how do we preserve Indigenous wisdom and how do we create bridges to our culture, how we use Indigenous medicine. So he's a very deep thinker, and we're very excited that he'll be joining us as well.
All right, so the focus of our training here, this is training for licensed clinicians or pre-licensed clinicians. And it's designed for folks who can legally provide psychedelic assisted psychotherapy work. We're going to focus on practical skills to support practitioners in providing PAP through the whole process. So the therapy that might, where it might become clear that some psychedelic work might be supportive. So everything from the introduction of PAP work to the preparation for a deep dive session or whatever kind of session is being offered. Might be a light dose session using ketamine, something like that. We'll be learning about sitting for sessions, what's involved with setting up the space, how to prepare the music, what types of themes and intentions to set up, the whole shebang in terms of providing deep dive sessions. And then we'll be also talking about working through integration, how to integrate psychedelic experiences, how to create understanding of what those experiences are saying, and how to weave those experiences into a person's life so that they can glean the magic and the healing from those experiences and stitch those in for a more balanced and um, you know to launch them into a better place than where they started from.
So each module has both a theoretical aspect, but as we were stressing already, a lot of experiential and also ritual focused. So each one of these modules will have a theme. And we're starting with the theme of the mind and perceptions in the first module, where we set the context. And we're also setting a kind of more ceremony mindset. As we said, that a lot of the work is experiential. So we're going to be doing moving and small diet experiences, as well as clinical tips and so on. And I forgot to say, actually, because we were so excited about the faculty, that between Susan and myself, we have, I don't know, 25 plus years of clinical practice under our belt. So you're getting a lot of practical help of how to go through the preparation, sitting, integration. We have a lot of experience of how to guide people into immersive experience. I totally forgot to kind of highlight us, actually, Susan. I was so excited about everybody else. Um, but each module has a theme. So we started with the perceptions and kind of setting the frame. We're going to learn about research in California. The first module is going to be joined by Karen and Ido, who are going to present some of the research findings, the current ones. And then we're also really going to talk about how to come into the therapist seat. How do you actually embody yourself into guiding another person for, for a long sustained time? How do we actually do that? So we're going to talk about the multidimensionality of the seat of the therapist. And we're going to start with tracking and with attunement and so on. And we're going to learn some core Hakomi techniques there as well. In the second module, we're going into the heart, which is about setting the intentions. What do we need to prepare? And it's everything from set and setting in terms of how do we prepare physically, but more importantly, how do we prepare our therapist mindset for the client, and what do we need to prepare our clients? And the kind of how do we help our clients to set intentions? How do we set intentions as the therapist? And then what does it really mean to open up to this kind of process? And we're also going to prepare in that weekend for the third weekend, which is about the embodiment. And that's really what we're going to dedicate. And Brad is going to talk about that in a minute. But we're going to dedicate this time. How do we sit with another person? What's involved, and the very practical aspects of it. So we're going to also learn some details around ketamine in particular that Brad is going to teach us. But how do we actually go into an in-depth process with the psychedelic work? The last module is about integration, spirit, and how do we work with transformation, and how do we integrate this material? And again, this is where the somatic and Hakomi lens is very important. How do we actually make meaning out of the experiences that we've had? How do we contextualize it? And how do we take the next step in our lives so that these experiences are not ephemeral, but they actually really take hold in our life towards lasting transformation? So how do we sustain this transformation as an integrative process, not as just one event, but as a sustaining practice into our lives? And Brad, do you want to take this one?
Great. Yes. Hi, everybody. So my name is Brad Jacobs. I'm a physician, medical doctor. And first of all, let me just set the stage to say, if those that don't know Manuela and Susan, you're in for a treat, and it's an honor to be actually learning from them both. And I'm really excited to be core faculty with them, as well as all the other amazing faculty that are part of the team. It's really, really exciting. And I think you guys will learn a lot. For those that don't know the two of them, you're in for a treat. My background, just briefly, is I've done deep work in lots of mind-body related therapies. So martial arts since I was 8 years old, yoga for about 30 years, and deep meditation work. And I work as a primary care physician and really have recognized that there's a lot of limits to what we can do as a physician in the current settings we're in. And the opportunity for both Hakomi, which I trained in several years ago, and now, and really what led me to that was I recognized that psychedelic medicine was a pathway through which people make significant change, transformation, as many of you probably know, which is why you're here today. But once I got trained in ketamine alone, I realized I didn't really want to be just the drug dealer dispensing the medicine. There's so much here to be able to learn and hold in a psychotherapeutic context. So I went and trained in Hakomi and did a 2-year training, which I also highly recommend. The comprehensive training, which was profound, and both Susan and Manuela were teachers of mine at that point. And then I brought both of these together in my work that I do as a physician, and both do offer ketamine as a service to patients and clients, as well as have done ketamine training. So it's a beautiful opportunity here to bring Hakomi with psychedelic medicine in a very practical way. Lots of the trainings that many of you have already perhaps done or are considering are very didactic and academic, which is fantastic, but you don't necessarily leave with the skills and the skill set you need to actually do the work and have that experience. And Manuel and Susan had already mentioned that. I just want to reiterate that. It's super important. So this weekend, module 3 of 4, and it's every other month. So this is module 3. We're going to start off with some didactics that occur prior to that module. So you have some time really in advance of actually that weekend. You'll actually sit with others who are doing ketamine, and if you choose to receive ketamine, you will actually receive that medicine as well. That is optional. So what we would plan for is, number one, in advance of the module, we would really excited to be able to teach you about the molecule itself, ketamine. There's other psychedelics out there, but the one that's currently legal and in practice now is ketamine. And it's really a fascinating medicine. And so you'll learn a lot about that, the pharmacology of it, drug interactions, how it's used at different doses, its history. It's fascinating. It's really will be exciting to talk about. In addition to that, there will also be some health screening. So we want to make sure if you do want to sit and take the medicine, we want to make sure it's safe for you. And so there'll be some personal health screening that we'll do. And that includes sort of a brief health intake, some blood pressure checks to make sure your blood pressure is normal and there's no issues with it. And just a conversation with you really about this in advance. During the weekend itself, it's really an opportunity to pair up in small groups, probably dyads, perhaps triads, depending on how things form between the group. And some people may opt out, not want to receive ketamine, which is fine. And in those small groups, then we will do, it's basically roughly a half day of the full day we'll be receiving the medicine and sitting for someone else or being under the influence of the medicine. And we'll do that, so you'll pair up. We will do that so that on the first 2 days will be lozenges, which is things you put in the mouth, and then the other day would be through administration intramuscularly in the arm. And again, this is all optional, whatever anyone wants to do, participate in. So that'll be split up over the 4 days. And then we'll also have some small group integration, as Manuela mentioned up front. You know, the medicine all by itself is really, there's a paucity of benefit in my experience that people have from it in the long term without integration. And with integration, you don't need the medicine on a long basis, depending on what you come in. And so the integration is really important, and we'll go through that in a very hands-on way with the guided, skills of Manuela, Susan, and the other faculty. And then some movement, somatic movement. And I think a nice way to come into the body, Manuela does some amazing somatic awareness work. I've trained in martial arts, so Tai Chi and Qigong. So there'll be some movement, somatic movement to allow you to come into the body and notice your energetic body. And then prior to using the medicine, prior to sitting. So it's really gonna be a full weekend. And I'm looking forward to that, doing that with you all.
We're very excited to have you part of it, Brad. And part of the somatic movement is going to be a whole offering, as Brad was saying, from his rich background, and I'll be offering a continuum movement as well, which I think you're going to find really helpful for this work. So in terms of the, if you're kind of coming in from Australia, it'd be, we cannot do right now the ketamine offerings, unfortunately. So what Brad was just talking about will only be available for the California training. So that's one of the big differences. And the difference between the California and Australia training is that we have really an in-person, both is going to be in person, but California has, actually, we want to talk about California, right? Or do you want me to go
It's
ahead? Yeah,
go ahead. It's fine.
okay,
Yeah,
go ahead. All right. So we're going to have four-day modules, as we said, with one experiential ketamine module in there that Brad was just explaining. And then you're going to have the core faculty that you saw, plus the additional guest faculty, and then the local assistants. And then you're also going to have Tara, who's going to be only in California. She's the teacher in training for California. And obviously, you're going to have the access to all the webinars, and then you're going to have peer group practice in between the modules as well to learn and really practice some of the skills that we're going to teach you. In Australia, we have a little bit of a different format. We have 2 5-day modules. They're going to be in Sydney, and we're gonna not be able to do the experiential ketamine, unfortunately, at this time. We'll hope in the future that we will, but right now we cannot. But you'll also have the same core faculty of Susan, myself, Karen, and Ido. And then we have obviously the same webinar guest faculty, and then we're going to have the local assistants, Australian local assistants, and there's some amazing assistants there that are currently doing the work because medicine work is actually legal in Australia, and several of the assistants are actually doing this kind of work there already and are involved in research as well in Australia. So that's exciting to have them be part of it. And also Australia will have peer group practice in between the 2 modules. So in Australia, we have a much more intensive. It's going to be like, we're not on a retreat, but it's retreat style. We're going to be, as I said, in Sydney, but it's going to be a more of an intensive. It's going to be the same curriculum, but it just in this format. In California, we're also going to have the Academy module at a different venue, which is more of a retreat style in Mill Valley, which is lovely. So we're going to have, we're not going to stay overnight, but we're going to have, it's going to be just day use, but it's more of a retreat setting. So that's going to be lovely for the experiential piece. So we're going to switch over now to a little bit more the registration and some of more the practical issues around the how to get into the training. And I'm going to hand it over to David.
Okay, thank you. And I am spotlighted. Perfect. Hi, hello everyone again. Yeah, so we have 2 different timelines going on. So I'm just going to be talking about each one, go over the pricing as well as the important dates that we should all be tracking. So starting first with California, we have an early registration benefit that, we really appreciate the early applications that come in. We also want to value your time for being so diligent with that. So the early registration price for the California training is $8,400. The regular registration price is $8,900. You'll see that the early registration date is by May 31st. So we want to get that in before the end of the month. And then the final registration date being July 31st. There's also an application fee for each application of $100. And we have the first session starting in August for the California training, August 22nd. I'm going to talk about Australia, and then I'm going to talk about a little bit about the scholarships as well. So if you want to go to the next slide.
Do you want to say something about the dosing weekend, the pricing? No?
Yeah, I could talk about that now here. You're going to notice that between the California and Australia, just the amount of days is a difference that affects the pricing, as well as the dosing weekend and the rental of the retreat space. So you'll notice that there is a difference in price between the 2 trainings. For the Australian registration, the early registration is $49.99, and then the regular registration is $53.99. There's a different timeline here, so this is something to note. The early registration ends on August 30th for the Australian training, and then the final registration is October 31st, with the first session starting on November 7th. That's a webinar, and then the first in-person module is at the end of November. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about scholarships. We definitely have a value of access and equitable access. So, and we recognize the investment for these trainings, and we want to make sure that we try to eliminate as many barriers as we can to welcome folks that might be facing financial hardship, those that might be connected to underrepresented groups, as well as those serving underrepresented groups, so that we can continue to spread the benefit that's in psychedelic assisted therapy to as many communities as possible. So what we urge you to do, if you're looking at the cost and thinking, well, I don't know if this is possible, we really ask you to put in an application, and then there's a separate form to fill out, a scholarship form. We ask you to do that, and we're going to be considering every request and trying to be as generous as possible. We are a nonprofit. We do our best to also fundraise to support our scholarship fund. But yeah, we do ask you to go forward with your application and let us know what's going on for you in your current status as it relates to paying tuition.
Thank you, David. So we'll have now a little bit of time to answer your question, and I think I'm going to stop sharing the slides
Sure.
and kind of come out and see if there are any kind of questions. How's this all landing on you in terms of, did we answer everything that you needed to know?
I have a few questions that I've captured that I can share. First one for the group that I'll bring in. A question from Catherine. How do you navigate and make room for sensitive issues around power differentials, cultural dynamics, and such, and other related topics?
You want to start
Want
with
me to
that?
speak to them?
Yeah.
Sure. Those are such crucial issues. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the therapist's seat. Much of Hakomi talks about the therapist's seat and how to hold it and how to intervene, when to intervene, and what intervention looks like. And this drills back down to our core values around nonviolence, the unity principle, not overpowering, not oversharing, not over directing. But the skillfulness of Hakomi is really to help get inside of a person's experience and help them to discover what it is actually they feel and see about things. So the holding of the seat and the holding of our authority comes from the perspective that it's not our place to have authority over or to impose in any way on clients. It's really important in the age of psychedelics and all that we have all heard about blunders happening, outright abuses happening in altered state realms. So, to be deeply rooted in ethics is a really important aspect of this training that we are very, very dedicated to. That's why when we sought to collaborate with Kylia Taylor, it was to do with that her whole focus is on working with altered states and the very unique and intricate dynamics that exist in those expanded state fields that are much more muted in regular psychotherapy. So we'll be doing a lot of tending to that, and a lot of placing of questions in regard to helping practitioners really learn what to ask, learn to locate themselves in their own experience, and to really look and reflect upon how they're interacting and the place from which we're interacting. Because our clients aren't just altered. We're in an altered, we might not be altered, but we are under the influence of an environment where there's an altering experience happening. Part of what we'll be doing also is that Kylia Taylor has a 3-part course that will be available to our students to go through and ask these with practices, somatic practices, to ask these very questions. So it's our intention for that to be a marquee piece of what we're discussing and learning about and developing awareness and skillfulness around, is how to hold an ethical space and how to get consultation, how to be deeply rooted in what could happen, but watching for the differences that these spaces offer us. So that's a really important question, and I'm glad that you asked. Thank you for
Yeah,
whomever
I'm
asked
really
it.
glad you asked it. In addition to what Susan just said, this is also, we're going to be looking at what the social location of the therapist is. So just the power differences, but also all the biases that we bring in as the therapist to this space. And I also know that Tara, having, coming from a First Nations background, that's her lineage, we're going to be bringing that into the space quite a bit. So that's a topic very dear to her heart. So we're going to be talking about what it really means to be bridging, psychotherapy with indigenous mindset and indigenous practices as well. So we definitely are going to be talking about that as well. So we welcome that kind of conversation.
Yeah. And that's something I'll just add, that Manuela and I and many of the staff and faculty for the Hakomi Institute have engaged in some processes of really deep looking at our own social locations, the way that we hold power, the way that we have had our own biases and blind spots. It's a big commitment in our greater Hakomi community as well, that we're have put quite a bit of effort into working on and are still working on. It's not like it's done, but that's a value of ours, and I'm really glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Continuous work. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you both. Just one note before I bring in a couple more questions. There's been a few questions around the specific dates. We did just post a few links that'll take you to the registration page. There's another post that does show all the dates. There's a lot of them when you bring all the modules and the webinars and the group practice dates together. So we do recommend that you just reference the registration site website for all of those. I'm going to group a few together. There's a question around professional background. So I'm a licensed occupational therapist. Would that qualify? And then another question I think relates to Australia is, what does it mean to be, what does it mean can legally provide? Is another question that we had.
I can tackle the Australia question. In Australia, there are different, as I understand at this time, there are different laws than in California. And so if you are legally, if you can legally provide psychedelic therapy, then we can accept you. So as I understand it, it's counselors, psychotherapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, MDs, but the term counselor in Australia, I think, has a very different background than it has here in California, for example. There are different licensure requirements in California than Australia. So if you are able, and that's something you need to check with your own, if you're, it's going to be in New South Wales, but you're practicing in New South Wales or other states in Australia, you need to check that you are able to be practicing psychedelic assisted therapy.
And I'll speak to the question about occupational therapy. I'm not familiar with what the board licensure includes, but I would call the board or encourage you to call your licensing board and ask the question, so you're covered, about whether or not you are able to provide psychotherapy, and with that, if you're able to provide psychedelic psychotherapy. And I think they will clarify what your licensure allows you to do. I don't believe that someone who maybe does physical therapy, for example, like if I have a broken hand, I got physical therapy. I don't think that's someone who would sit with clients doing psychotherapeutic work. I don't believe, but I don't know. I don't have that licensure. So I think if there's a question about what your license deems appropriate for your training and background, please check in with your licensing board to see if that's something that you are trained to do. Yeah.
Great. Brad, maybe this question's for you around other psychedelic medicine. So psilocybin, LSD, when any of those, if they become legal, how well will this training prepare one to use other medicines as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the overall, I would say at the broader view, the overall training holds space for any state, what I would call healing state of consciousness or enhanced state. Some people call it altered, which is not my preferred term, state of consciousness. Um, so the overall training creates the container for any experience, any immersive experience, as Manuela used that word, immersive experiences for 25 years between Susan and Manuela, any of those immersive experience. So that's my answer to that. I would also say that I don't know if this is a nuance in the question. The truth is the different medicines each have their own qualities and signatures, and the energetic relationship that you have with that, or you as a client would have with that medicine, is a whole nother conversation, and we won't be going into depth around that that I know of. Maybe it'll come up in some of the guest speakers, and I'll let Susan speak to that if I'm incorrect. So I would say, in short, this is very applicable. And the medicine, ketamine itself, sitting with someone who's under the influence of psychedelic medicine, regardless of the medicine, as they both mentioned earlier, it really allows things to emerge, whether it's previous trauma or other vulnerabilities that show up. And ketamine is one of many vehicles that allow that to manifest. Susan, anything?
Yeah, I'll add that we will speak, briefly, not in depth. We're not going to have experientials with any medicines that we're not legally able to provide experientials around. But we will talk a little bit about the other of the, the known psychedelics, a little bit about the experiences that those are used for. We are aware that there may be changes in legalities around using other medicines, in particular, MDMA and psilocybin, that are being studied right now. And so I can confidently say that the training that it will be offered will be supportive of expanded state work, regardless of the type of medicine. But we'll talk a little bit about it, but we won't be offering it as an experiential component, because we are going to do everything that we do will be legal and within the limits of the law. Do you have anything else to say about that, Manuela?
I think you both covered it. Yeah, that's exactly right. And as the landscape shifts, then who knows?
Yep.
Okay, I think we have room for
just one comment on that. I will say the anticipated date for FDA approval of MDMA is August 9th, may be delayed, but so it will be happening in the midst of our training. And
Right.
So we don't know what that's going to look like. And we're all fully prepared to manage any sort of opportunities that present themselves.
Yeah, thanks.
there's two questions about CEUs. If we could talk about that between the California and Australia training, any type of certificate or credential for completing the training, and then looking at CEUs for the course in Australia.
That's more a question for Hillary, right? And you, actually, the CEUs, I'm not so sure. Hillary, do you know about the CEUs?
We will have CEs for California. I'm not familiar with Australia.
Yeah, Australia doesn't have CEUs in the same way. So we have it for California. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a certificate of completion
Yes.
program. That's what we're
For
going to offer.
both.
Yeah.
Yes.
For both.
Yes.
And then another grouping of questions around folks that might have attended other Hakomi trainings. So there's a question around redundancy between if you might have attended a Pro 1, Pro 2 training and what's part of this material. And then another question around, would you recommend this as individuals' first comprehensive Hakomi training in lieu of another comprehensive level 1 or level 2?
Yeah, I can take that. So this is not in lieu of a comprehensive Hakomi training. yes, you will recognize, of course, the Hakomi signatures, but we're covering so much more in here because it's really the integration of Hakomi and psychedelics. So there's a lot, as we said, there's a lot of practicality, there's kind of ritual and ceremony style. There's so many details about how to apply Hakomi to the psychedelic work. So it's not an either or. If you really want to study Hakomi in depth, then we recommend that you go to skills training or com training. That the skills training we offer also in body-wise. The com training is offered in different areas. It's also offered in Australia. There's a long comprehensive training there if you're in Australia area or New Zealand. But it's really not a Hakomi training to learn the entire method of Hakomi. We are really using it's almost like the pith instruction of Hakomi, and then how you use that in the psychedelic work, because there are pieces of Hakomi that are incredibly aligned and so supportive of the psychedelic process. And then there are parts of the method that would not be so applicable because it's a different body of work, really. So this is really about Hakomi, the best practices of Hakomi, best practices as it applies to psychedelic work, and a lot more that we're teaching of the integration of these two fields coming together. It's really an offering to the field of psychedelics because we recognize that the working with the unfolding process is very unique to Hakomi, and that's what we really are trying to teach here. Anything you want to add there, Susan?
Nope, I think you said it. I think we're also out of time.
Yeah,
So
we're out of time.
perfectly timed. Yeah. I
Thank
will
you.
say, please send in your questions. We'll be happy to answer them. If you are, apply, and we will get back to you if you have any concerns. But yeah, we're really glad that you all came. We're so happy for a big turnout, and we really hope to see you. We think it'll be fun and heartful and deep. So yeah.
And it's going to be a learning from the inside out. So this is a training from the soma up. So this is really an experiential, immersive learning through your own experience and the experience of community. And that's a very different kind of learning. So I hope you join us in Australia or in California, and we'll let us know. And thanks everybody for showing up, and thanks to EmbodyWise staff, and thanks to Brad, and yeah, so many beautiful familiar faces.
Yeah. All right. Take care,
Good.
everyone. Hope
Bye
to see you.
everyone. Bye.